The glass didn't just slip from her fingers. It shattered like a memory she had buried for years, exploding across polished marble as every head in the grand ballroom turned at once. And in that frozen second, beneath chandeliers that glittered like 1,000 silent witnesses, a single father standing at the entrance, uninvited, unwanted, realized that his entire past had just caught up with him. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Heartfelt Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. The man's name was Arman Qureshi, though few people in that room would have known it, and even fewer would have cared. He stood just outside the velvet rope, his shoes worn at the edges, his suit pressed carefully but undeniably old, carrying the weight of years that had not been kind. Beside him, holding tightly to his hand, was his son, 8-year-old Sami, whose wide, curious eyes reflected the golden glow of a world they clearly did not belong to. The security staff had already turned them away twice. Politely at first, then with increasing firmness, their expressions hardening with the practiced indifference reserved for people who didn't fit the evening's expectations. Arman hadn't come for himself. He had long stopped expecting doors to open for him. He had come because of Sami, because the boy had spent weeks talking about the event after seeing a poster online. A charity gala hosted by one of the most powerful corporate leaders in the country, a woman known not just for her wealth, but for her advocacy for children's education. Sami had believed, with the unshaken faith only children possess, that if they just showed up, someone would listen, someone would care. Arman had tried to explain the reality gently, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to extinguish that spark in his son's eyes. So they came, and they were stopped. The guards didn't see a father who had worked double shifts for years, who had skipped meals so his son could eat, who had stayed up night after night helping with homework despite exhaustion pulling at his bones. They didn't see the countless rejections he had endured, the job interviews that ended in polite smiles and silent judgments, the way society quietly pushed him to the margins. They saw only what stood in front of them, a man who didn't belong at a gala of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. Sami's grip tightened as another refusal came, softer this time, almost apologetic but final. The boy didn't cry. He simply looked up at his father, confusion flickering across his face like a shadow passing over sunlight, and that look was harder to bear than any insult. Arman knelt down, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, brushing a stray lock of hair from Sami's forehead. He had promised his son they would at least try. He had kept that promise. Now it was time to teach him another lesson, one far more difficult. That sometimes the world doesn't open its doors, no matter how politely you knock. But before he could stand, before he could guide Sami away from the glowing hall and back into the ordinary night, something shifted. Inside the ballroom, laughter softened. Conversation slowed. Attention began to ripple toward the entrance, subtle at first, then undeniable. At the center of it all stood the CEO, Zara Mera, a name synonymous with success, influence, and almost mythic rise from obscurity to power. She had been mid-conversation, surrounded by executives and dignitaries, when her gaze drifted, just for a second, toward the commotion near the doors. And then she saw the boy. The glass fell. The sound echoed like a gunshot. No one understood why. Not yet. Zara stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between past and present, her mind unraveling years in a heartbeat. The child at the entrance wasn't just any child. There was something in his face, something achingly familiar. The curve of his smile, the shape of his eyes, the quiet resilience in the way he held himself despite being turned away. It was like looking into a memory she had tried to bury, a life she had convinced herself was gone forever. Without a word, she moved. The room parted for her instinctively, confusion trailing in her wake. Heels clicked against marble as she approached the entrance, each step pulling her deeper into a truth she wasn't ready to face. The guard straightened, startled, unsure whether they had made a mistake or whether something far more complicated was unfolding. Arman noticed her approach and instinctively stepped back, placing himself slightly in front of Sami, protective even in uncertainty. He had no idea who she was beyond the distant recognition of a face seen on billboards and news clips. To him, she was just another powerful figure in a world that had never had space for him. But Zara stopped just a few feet away, her eyes locked on Sami. Time seemed to stretch. The boy looked back at her, curious, unafraid. And in that silent exchange, something unspoken passed between them. Arman cleared his throat, breaking the tension, his voice steady but cautious, as he explained they hadn't meant to cause trouble, that they were leaving. He spoke with dignity, the kind forged through hardship, unwilling to beg even when life had given him every reason to. Zara barely heard him. Her focus shifted slowly, reluctantly, to Arman's face. And then it hit her. Recognition, shock, regret, all at once. The years fell away, revealing a past she had locked behind ambition and survival. A past where choices had been made, difficult, irreversible choices that had shaped the course of her life. And standing in front of her was not just a stranger. He was a chapter she had never truly closed. The room buzzed with whispers, speculation growing like wildfire. Guests leaned in, trying to piece together the scene unfolding before them. Why was the CEO standing at the entrance? Why was she staring at that man and his child as if they were ghosts? Zara's composure, so carefully maintained over years, began to crack. She asked the guards to step aside. They obeyed immediately. Arman hesitated, unsure whether this was a gesture of kindness or something else entirely. But Sami, still holding his hand, took a small step forward, his curiosity outweighing his doubt. And Arman followed, because that's what fathers do. They step into uncertainty, so their children don't have to. As they crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations faded. Eyes followed them. The grandeur of the hall felt overwhelming, almost unreal, but Sami's grip remained steady, grounding Arman in the moment. Zara knelt down in front of the boy, her expression softening in a way few had ever seen. She studied his face, every detail, as if searching for confirmation of something her heart already knew. And then she smiled, a fragile, trembling smile that carried years of unspoken emotion. Arman watched, confusion turning into unease. Something wasn't right. Something was happening that he didn't understand. The past, long buried, was rising to the surface, and it was about to change everything. The night that was supposed to be just another rejection, another quiet disappointment in a life full of them, was transforming into something far greater, a collision of choices, consequences, and second chances. Because sometimes the doors that remain closed the longest are the ones that open in the most unexpected ways. As the evening unfolded, truths began to emerge slowly, painfully. Zara's past wasn't the polished success story the world believed. It was built on sacrifice, on walking away from things she thought she couldn't keep. Years ago, before the empire, before the recognition, there had been a different life. One where love had existed, fragile and uncertain, and where decisions had been made under pressure, fear, and ambition. Arman had been part of that life. And Sami was not just a coincidence. The realization didn't come all at once. It seeped in, piece by piece, through glances, through questions, through the quiet unraveling of carefully constructed walls. Arman resisted it at first, unwilling to reopen wounds he had spent years trying to heal. But the truth has a way of finding its voice, no matter how deeply it is buried. The Gala faded into the background as the real story took center stage. A story of separation, of resilience, of a father who never gave up, and of a woman who was finally forced to confront the cost of her choices. By the time the night drew to a close, nothing was the same. Not for Arman, not for Zara, and certainly not for Sami. Because sometimes, a single moment, a dropped glass, a shared glance, an unexpected encounter, can rewrite an entire lifetime. And as they stood together, no longer strangers but not yet fully reconciled, there was something fragile but undeniable in the air. Hope. Before we end, if this story touched your heart even a little, don't scroll away, like comment, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. Your support means more than you know. And one more special request. Tell us in the comments, do you believe the past should define us, or do we all deserve a fresh start? Because in the end, the most powerful stories aren't about perfection. They're about redemption. They're about the courage to face what we've lost, and the strength to hold on to what we still have.